Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Brachos, Perek Daled, Halacha Aleph, and God willing, beginning Halacha Beis. And the Ois V'Hader's edition, we are learning Daf Mem Zayin. We left off on Daf Mem Vav Amid Beis, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid, Amar Rabbi Chanina, by the dot. We're dedicating this class for the miraculous freeing of all of our hostages and for the hatzlacha of all of our soldiers and for the protection and well-being of all the Jewish people. Amen. So we started by the 2 dots, the Gemara quoting both Rabbi and Abchia, based on the Mishnah statement that Tfilas Arvis Ein Lo Keva, and in the times of Chazal, it was a elective prayer. In other words, you opted whether you want to daven maitiv or not. Tfilas arvis reshus. So even for the people that opted in, Rabbi and Abchia had this big leniency, allowing a person to daven maitiv when it's still light. In other words, since we had on our Mishnah the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda that day is only until Plaga Mincha, that from Plaga Mincha onwards, whenever you want, you can daven maitiv. Not the way we learned the halacha, we quoted correctly the halacha when we learned the Mishnah, that you can't have tarta de sasre, that if you want to choose like Rabbi Yehuda, you always have to be consistent, Keshitas Rabbi Yehuda, always, but you can't one day do this and one day do that, and you certainly cannot on the same day daven mincha after Plaga Mincha, and then daven maitiv after Plaga Mincha before it gets dark. Rabbi and Abchia did not have that approach. They were very lenient. And now that's where we left off. The Gemara is going to continue to quote us the Shita of Rabbi Chanina. It's not clear what a Shita's Rabbi Chanina, but the Gemara initially understands that Shita's Rabbi Chanina is like Rabbi and like Rabbi Chia. However, the Gemara is going to quote Rabbi Yechanan, who disputes the Shita of Rabbi Chanina, as we will explain the Sugya. We will also learn today another leniency based on the ruling that Tfilas Arvis is Rishus, as we will see, that if a person is already in bed and they're tired and they realize, oops, I forgot to daven maitiv, they don't need to get out of bed at all. And we're going to share a little bit of halacha lemaisa. Number one, we were makabel, we the Jewish people already accepted Arvis upon us like a choiva. Nevertheless, based on our sugyas here in the Yerushalmi, there will be some leniencies, particularly when it comes to Friday night, as we will learn, since, anyways, there is a mitzvah to be moisav mechoil al hakodesh. Therefore, lechatchila, as we will say, even if a person normally davens maitiv after dark, doesn't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, davens mincha until we do a belza shkia. Nevertheless, Friday night will be unique. We will learn other leniencies that are brought down in various halachic authorities. Now, what we will have be'ikr on Daf Mem Zayin is the story that we have also in Bavli, Brachas Daf Chav Zayin Amid Beis and Daf Chav Ches, how Rabban Gamliel was demoted, how Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was appointed in his stead to be the Nasi, how there was an ultimate reconciliation, but even after the reconciliation, there was a certain type of new partnership that was left in which we did not demote Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So there was a certain joint sharing of the status of a Nasi. And what will be extremely important to do will be, for those who have time, to learn that Gemara in Brachas Bavli and to relearn the sugya that we will learn today, and to see how, on one hand, there are certain details that are written here that are not written there. There are certain details that are written there, many more details that are written there that are not written here, but there's going to be certain points of the story, certain parts of the story in which there is a discrepancy. Where there is pashut, you see clearly there's some sort of disagreement between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi as to what happened. All of that is going to go into our Daf Mem Zayin Amid Beis, to the new Mishnah, to Halacha Beis, and God willing, we'll see how time plays itself out. We're going to learn in the second Mishnah of this chapter the tefillah of Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, when he entered the Beis HaMedrash, the tefillah that he said whenever he left the Beis HaMedrash. We're going to learn in the Gemara other personal tefillos of Tanoim that they made, as we will see this amazing sugya. Without any further ado, Daf Mem Vav Amid Beis, by the Nekuda, by the Dot, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid, Amar Rabbi Chanina. Now, the Gemara begins by quoting Rabbi Chanina, who says that Mishochani, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosi, Eitzel Pontekecha, that there was a time that Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yosi, he brought me close to a certain pundak, to a certain inn, to a krechme, and v'amarli, and he told me, this is Rabbi Shmuel, and he was quoting his great father, Rabbi Yosi, Kan nispalal abba shalei l'Shabbos be'erev Shabbos. Here, my father Rabbi Yosi, l'chayda once, as a, he davened maitiv when it was really erev Shabbos, which means it was taka plaga mincha, but it was still, plaga mincha is an hour and 50 minutes before shkia. It's really day. But my father davened maitiv over here, and the Gemara understands now that Rabbi Chanina, who was quoting the story, is trying to make the point, like we had above from Rabbi, like we had above from Rabbi Chia, that being Tfilas Avos Rishus, when you want, you can daven maitiv. You can daven maitiv when it's still light. Now, unlike Rabbi Chia, that made a statement not concerning Friday night. They made a statement stam that whoever wants, even if you choose to daven maitiv, it's rishus, then you can daven when it's still day. Here, the story happened on the night of Shabbos. And therefore, Rabbi Chanina is quoting the story as a third Tana, which is mamash lenient from the case of Rabbi Yosi davening Friday night early. The Gemara is going to reject that altogether. But really, there are two levels of rejection. So first, Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph on the top, Amar Rav Ami, I want you to know, and this is not something that Rav Ami heard personally from Rabbi Yechanan, but he had a tradition that Rabbi Chanina made a statement, and Rabbi Yechanan disagrees with Rabbi Chanina, and Rav Ami understood for Rabbi Yechanan's disagreement to be regarding this, that Rabbi Yechanan Pali. What does it mean? Does he argue? So the Charedim says, 4 lines from the top of the Amid, that just because there was a one-time story that Rabbi Yosi davened Kabbalah Shabbos, he davened the maitiv Friday night early, he says, maybe it was a one-time thing. L'kula alma, everyone agrees that as a one-time oinus, sometimes you're going on a trip. Remember when I was a chiyuv, St. Kaddish from my father, I went to Eretz Yisrael. It's very difficult. You want to daven with a minion. Going back is very easy. Going there is gefährlich. So, because you lose right away 10 hours. So I remember I davened mincha. That was Tama mincha. You daven mincha in one of the minyanim they have here early. And then you make a minyan of maitiv right after plaga mincha. That can work. These minyanim can work. A one-time thing you can do. Maybe it was only a one-time thing. The fact that you saw Rabbi Yosi davening once is not a raya that he holds like Rabbi Chia. This is what Rav Ami says. Now the Gemara says, Rabbi Ami says, Rabbi Yechanan argued because maybe it was a one-time oinus. However, it continues Rav Ami. Really doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense that Rabbi Yechanan would even argue. Why? Because I don't even need to say it was a one-time thing. Even if Rabbi Yosi davened every Friday night early, Friday night is different from any other night of the week. And this is a big point that he's making, which is negeya halacha l'maisa all the way nowadays. And which is, my friends, there's a mitzvah to be moisev mechol ala kodesh. What does that mean? That means that even though Shabbos comes in, let's say mesafik mibein hashmashos, even nowadays, we don't begin the bein hashmashos when it really begins. We begin it a few minutes earlier. Don't share the news. When we say candle lighting is 18 minutes before Shkia, it's really 22 minutes before Shkia. But you can't take in Shabbos 22 minutes later because there's a mitzvah, doyeraisa, to take on Shabbos early. No, it's once, and when you take in Shabbos early, all of the lamates malachas that you're not allowed to keep on Shabbos, doyeraisa, you can keep then. You cannot. The only leniency we have some to know is Amir Ala'akum, without getting into it right now. But me, if I'm a Kabbalah Shabbos and early, it's mamish for Hilchei Shabbos, it's Shabbos. So since there's a thing to be Moisav ala Kodesh, I can argue, says Rav Ami, that the reason why Rabbi Yosi davened early is because Friday night is different. Shmuley, and you can this halacha l'maisa, even people that never followed Rabbi Yehuda. And when we learned the Mishnah, we learned the Charedim that says you have to pick a shita. When we say that you can paskin like Rabbanan or like Rabbi Yehuda concerning Mincha, you got to be consistent every day. Rav Ami is saying, no, you don't. You have to be consistent every weekday, not Friday night. a person lechatchila can always paskin like the chachamim during the weekdays. That means I'm davening mincha until when it's mamish dark. Bimdumei chama. But Friday night I can take in Shabbos early lechatchila as long as I daven mincha before plaga mincha, because there's a mitzvah to be moisev ala kodesh. And furthermore, it's not only I get this logic of moisif mincha ala kodesh. I'll prove to you that there were certain cities in Eretz Yisrael that even though normally they never daven mincha until plaga mincha, they daven mincha until it was night. They didn't paskan like Rabbi Yehuda. Friday night was different. They were makabel Shabbos Friday night. Ad hayoyim hazeh. It's very common to have this. People that are taking Shabbos early, and their story was va'oid the Salkin choimraya min Arav. There was a city called Arav, and the donkey drivers that would go from Arav until the other city of Tzipoiden. This is all in the north of Eretz Yisrael. And when they would arrive in Tzipoiden, they would say that Kfar Shavas Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa be'iroi. Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa already accepted Shabbos in the city. That means that they were there when he was Makabel Shabbos. They were not Makabel Shabbos. When you have a city, if there's only one shul in the city, just to know, if everyone is Makabel Shabbos early, everyone has to join them. But when you live in a larger city, like here in Los Angeles, people can choose to do whatever they want. People can choose to do whatever they want, because some in Yonam taken early, some in Yonam taken in late. So they were made, they testified that Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa was always Makabel Shabbos Friday night early. Not because Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa always paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. During the week, he davened mincha also late. So therefore, concludes Rav Ami, Vaida Amrada. That forces me to say that Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yochanan, who argues, was not concerning Friday night. It was regarding something else. What was the something else? That Amar Rabbi Chanina, Mishachani, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosi, Eitzel Punagecha, that begins the same. That Rabbi Chanina testified that there was a time that Rabbi Shmuel brought Rabbi Chanina to a certain place, to a certain inn, and he testified regarding his father Rabbi Yosi, not concerning Friday night. That's the biggest chiddush. That over here there was a time that my father Rabbi Yosi davened ma'ariv for Matzah Shabbos after Plaga Mincha when it was still day. Now I want you to know something. He davened ma'ariv shel choil of Matzah Shabbos when it was still light. That's the end of Shabbos. Now I want you to know, when you do that, no one holds that you can end Shabbos early. No one holds you can end Shabbos. For Hilchas Shabbos, you got to wait until late, till it's dark, and we add the tzeis from Matzah Shabbos is much later than the normal tzeis. Why? There was a reason why he davened ma'ariv early, and I can tell you perhaps what the reason was. And we mentioned this a while back. I learned this when I was an oinen for my father over Shabbos. It was too late. I heard it from Rabbi Zajac, all of a shalom, that since a oinen doesn't make Havdalah, because my father wanted to be better in Eretz Yisrael, he passed away in Brazil, it's not shayach to bury before Wednesday. That's the way it used to be. Maybe it changed. That's because of the size of the airplanes that travel from here to there. The only way it takes that amount of time. Now, an oinen doesn't make Havdalah. So if a person was an oinen over Shabbos, but the burial was until Tuesday, then they make Havdalah after the burial, because you can make Havdalah up until Tuesday. Once it's already Wednesday, can't even make Havdalah. I didn't make Havdalah that week, sir. Rabbi Zajac told me what you do then is you do what this. You daven mincha on Shabbos before Plaga Mincha. You daven ma'ariv when it's still light. You cannot be mechalel Shabbos, but you make Havdalah in Shemona Esrei, and then you make Havdalah on the cup without the name. In other words, that was what the Rabbi Yochanan was saying. That Rabbi Yochanan says that maybe it was an exception. Maybe there was an exception. You can't even bring a proof from over there. Bottom line is, concludes Rav Ami, Vafilu af Allah lihav tzarech mifliga. Rabbi Yochanan should not have even argued with that by saying maybe it was exception, because now, says Rav Ami, he goes back to what we had in the beginning of the sugya, that since Rabbi mefaket la abdana moirei achris komit ziboram man the matzle yitzal lideramsha ad yom koim, and Rabbi Chia bar va also mefaket la moirei achris komit ziboram, the same concept that man the matzle, whoever chooses to daven ma'ariv, which was then optional, it was an elective prayer, yatz lideramsha ad yom koim. So therefore. Why would Rabbi Yochanan argue? Why was Rabbi Yochanan saying that there was some sort of oinus? You don't need to say that. You can say that the great Tanoim held that no, that you could, whenever you want, daven maitiv early. Meaning, as long as you daven mincha before plaga mincha, you can daven maitiv after plaga mincha. So ends the sugi. Now, before we go on, because of this concept of Meisifim Echad Ala Kodesh, and because of the fact that you had Tanoim that said you can daven maitiv early, the poil mamish, two things. Number one, not like the way we learned the Mishnah. We learned the Mishnah correctly, that if you want to paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, Benegei at night begins plaga mincha, you always have to do so. Also, many poskim hold that a person has the choice nowadays, lechatchila, during the week, to paskin like the Rabban. I'm going to daven mincha when it's getting dark. I'm not going to daven mincha before plaga mincha. Friday night, that can be Mekabel Shabbos early, dafka because Meisifim Echad Ala Kodesh. Number two, even more than that. Now, this is a big chiddush, and that is that even if you daven at any given day, during the week, Friday night, even if you daven mincha, not before plaga mincha, if you're davening with a minyan, and if the minyan is going to have to stop and go home, because something we daven here, mamash bells mincha, but what happens if a person davens mincha an hour before shkia? So what would happen to have a minyan? People will have to, no one is going to stay there for an hour and a half until it says. They would go home and they would come back. If you are concerned that people won't regather for a minyan, then mit a minyan, many people are living. And that's something until today, at least in many Ashkenazim, many Sephardim shul here in LA, especially in the summer, they'll daven mincha. No, it's people are working, so it's hard to go home and to leave home. You're needed at home. We should be more helpful at home. So what happens is there are many shuls that do it. They do Tarta de Sasra on the same night. They do that only for the minyan. That's a big difference to remember that with a minyan, you have that leg to lean on. Without a minyan, it's very difficult on the same night to daven mincha, whatever, a half an hour before shkia, and then say, I can daven maitiv right away. It's not seis because Rabbi Yehuda. That's something that's very difficult. Now let's learn about another leniency that we have based on the fact that Tfilas Arvis is Rishus. The base Rabbi Yanai Omrim, the Yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai, hold that, let me tell you another application of Rishus. What happens if it's inconvenient to daven maitiv? Not every night. You are already in bed. It just happens. You went on vacation. You went to a place where you're not davening with the minyan, for right or wrong. It's another. And you're laying in bed and you're about to fall asleep. You say, "Oh my God, I didn't daven maitiv." I'm not talking about a person who didn't say Shema. There's nothing to talk about. You have to say Shema. But these things are shayah. Many people say Shema before they go to sleep. Even people that don't say the whole Fish Shalamita, they know they get it before they get undressed. They say Shema. They say the whole Shema. So the Shema, he said. Then he I didn't daven maitiv. So they said, if you are already in bed, you can get shlav gesundheit. Because Tfilas Arvis is rishus that Allah Adam al mitos. You are already in bed, and ein matrichen oisem later. For that you don't have to wake up. Amar Rab Zeira says Rab Zeira, I disagree with that. Kol man the havena avad kain. I did that. I knew that leniency. It happened to me. It's good to know that the great Rab Zeira happened. It happens. He went to bed and he realized he didn't have a maitiv. And he knew about this leniency. So he says, you know what, I'm going to sleep. He had terrible nightmares. And it didn't happen once. It didn't happen once. It happened a few times. And he realized every time I relied on this leniency, have a mefached balayla. Mefached balayla says the Chanedim that he had nightmares. Mizbahel b'chezyoyno roim. He had visions that were very bad. So therefore, I realized the Eibushet is telling me, don't do that. So it's not only we learn before in the Masechta that I've saying Shema al Hamita is a Shemira, even if you said Shema al Hamita. Maitiv is a Shemira. Leis lach elakado. The only leniency I have, you can be lenient, but you know how you can be lenient? That if you want, you can rely on Rabbi. You can rely on, if it's not convenient, daven maitiv, you're exhausted. You can't keep your eyes open. Another oinus. You daven mincha after plaga mincha. But the dav's getting schlafen, daven maitiv. Just to know, the problem is with Shema. In the case that I just mentioned, that the Rebbe mefaked la'abdan amrei, Rebbe told the Abdan, his interpreter, his mouthpiece, Achris coming to make this announcement that man damatzli, whoever opts to daven maitiv, whoever chooses, you can be lenient. Yatzli ben amshad yemekoyim. Reb Chia barva mefaked la'amrei, man damatzli yatzli ben amshad yemekoyim. That you can do. But to completely omit maitiv, even if it's inconvenient, that's something that you shouldn't do. You're going to have nightmares. Givaldik. Says the Omar Rabbi, Omar Rabbi Yaakov Baracho, Tony, come on. We learned in a Braisa over there. Over there means in bubble. We got this Braisa, not from here, but from there. That Tefillah, so out of Mahu, that really, everything we learned until now was based on a statement. That Tefillah's Arvis is Rishus. Really? It's a Machlekes. There was a Braisa that they had in tradition in bubble that Rabbi Gamliel holds it's a Chayva. How great is that? And by the way, if it's a Chayva, everything changes. If it's a Chayva, it means the best you can do is like we learned in the Mishnah. You can always paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. That's not a problem. But if you don't paskin any times like Rabbi Yehuda, you can't be lenient. You definitely can never omit maidiv. It's only Rabbi Yeshua that holds it to the shus. I heard a good word. What's underlying the machlekes? We had before in the Yerushalmi 3 reasons for the 3 tefillas. We're going to go into the second and the third. The first is unique to the Yerushalmi. The second one was that the tefillah is always tiknum. And the third one, and we had many sugyas on that, it's connected to korbanos. If it's always tiknum, what Yaakov is less than Avram than Yitzchak and Avram? Of course not. We have 3 others. If Avram was Masak and Shachris, Yitzchak, Mincha, and Yankov, Maidiv is just as obligatory as the other 2. If it's connected, the korbanos, there's taka only 2 korbanos. And Pedarim ve'evarim is something you can bring during the day. And if you don't bring it, b'di'evet, the carbon was nisratza. So Maidiv is taka different. So really, that machlekes can be connected to this machlekes. So first of all, I don't know. Probably, you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent. Always, listen, the Gemara says in Bavli that the machlekes Rabban and Rabbi Yehuda regarding mincha, there's no psak din. You can choose how to paskin. We can paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, that night begins plaga mincha, but then you always have to be consistent. Always, always. Amar Rabbi Chaninon. Asyon ilib pal gevasa kinam pal gevasa. Now that I know there's a machlekes tanoim, whether maidiv is reshus or whether it's chayva, now I'm going to make a link between the following machlekes amiroim that we learned above to this machlekes tanoim. What machlekes is he referring to? Shmuli, if you remember, we had a machlekes whether in the few times that you daven ne'ilah. Now we only daven ne'ilah on Yom Kippur, but they used to daven ne'ilah on the days of the Maimah. They used to daven ne'ilah on the kind of sibur for rain. We had a machlekes amiroim. If a person daven, remember we had that question: when is the time for ne'ilah? What happens if they daven ne'ilah when it was dark? In Chabad Solo, we daven. It's darkish. We daven quick. Can you say I daven ne'ilah? I don't have to daven maidiv. There was a machlekes amiroim. Now the Gemara says, let me tell you, one is connected to the other. Think about it. If maidiv is reshus, it's easier to say you daven the ilah. It's in the place of maidiv. If maidiv is chayva, you can't say it. Mando amar chayva eine ilah pertera shalerev. How could you? You can't substitute shachris. You can't substitute mincha. Why would you be? What's even the havamina? But the one who holds, which is really the sheet of our Mishnah, guys, Rabbeinu Hakadosh wrote the words tefillah so erev ein lo keva. He didn't say kol alayla, tarta mashma. Okay, like Rabbi Yeshua. Mando amar reshus. And by the way, just I want to go back to Rabbi Blanner's question. We paskin like Rabbi Yeshua. We paskin tefillas erev reshus. Even though now, meaning after the times of the Gemara, all of the Jewish people were makabel maidiv like a chayv. But since it begins like a reshus, then yes, today you can say that I don't have to be consistent. Friday night is special. I'm talking about Rabbi. Your question is l'shitas Rabbi Gamliel. Okay.
Didn't we learn that? Even if you say it's Keneged the Karbanis, we ended up concluding that Ma'ariv is Keneged the
No. We had that was another unique sheet in Yerushalmi of Rabbi Yossi Rab Mendel that Minchas Keneged Ketoidis. That was something else, which is that's why Mincha Ketana. Why is Mincha Ketana 9.5 hours? Okay.
That way, if you miss Ma'ariv and if it's Rishut, you don't have to say the next morning's. I mean, you don't have to repeat the Shachayit of next morning.
I would say that since we were mekabel like a chayva, at least the Gemara, at least up until here, we never learned about Tashlumin yet. So let's leave that question open. Okay. You're saying would make sense, but you can argue against it. I don't know. Okay. Like we mentioned in the intro, it's good to know this. Whoever has time, open up a Babeli, learn the story in Chav Zayin, Amid Beis, Chav Ches, Brachas, this story, a big story. You'll notice details here that you don't have there. At least one detail I have, which is unusual because Yerushalmi is much more rekitza. But then, and there are many more details in the Babli than here, and there are clear discrepancies. Clear. And that's another topic. How can they even be? But you see, what happened? This story happened 14 years after the Churban HaBayis. This detail is very important because many comment and they want to understand why Rabbi Gamliel was so forceful. He was forceful. And he was forceful, just to give some context, is that, don't forget, there was a Churban, there was a Holocaust. The Churban Beis HaMikdash was a Holocaust. The amount of Jews that got killed, the amount of Jews that were kidnapped into Rome and sold there as slaves. I know that Hamas is much worse. You can't compare what they're doing. But there was a Churban. And they abolished the Sanhedrin. I want to say right now that the reason why it's called Kerem B'Yavna, Kerem means a vineyard. You're going to have these words. I'll say it right now. That the Sanhedrin introduced the sitting in a semicircle. The Goyim who stole everything from us, they stole the fact that in Senates, they sit in a semicircle. That is something that they learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. It's gavaldic for all of the legislators to be able to see each other's faces properly. When you have very large rows, even 3 or 4 people, it's hard to see the expression of the other. The Rome abolished, they attempted to abolish the Sanhedrin. We, under their noses, we kept the Sanhedrin going for many years after Churban HaBayis. Ultimately, in Tiberia, it was abolished. In Yavne, the yeshiva was the Sanhedrin. The way we camouflage the Sanhedrin is not sitting in the semicircle, is by sitting in rows. In a Beis Medrash, you sit in rows. In the Sanhedrin, you sit in a semicircle. So bottom line, since it was really the Sanhedrin, Rabbi Gamliel wanted to make sure that the only institution of the Yidden left should have a lot of authority. And whoever dared to challenge the authority of the Nasi, this was not ego, God forbid. These were tzaddikim gedolim, Rabbi Gamliel, they were very forceful against it, just to have that context. So what happened was like this. In Bavli, you know what it says? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And I think there's a reason why the Yerushalmi doesn't mention his name, because this story caused a chaos. And we don't want to give any guilt to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. In other words, you can ask, why did the Talmud even do what he did? Which is, he asked the shayla of one, he asked the shayla of the other. It was good what he did. He wanted to learn. When you ask a halacha l'maisa, you can't ask to Rabban. When you're in the context of a Beis HaMedrash and you ask a shayla different, I think we don't even want to mention his name, but it was with the great Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. What happened? He asked, and he asked the Rabbi Yeshua, Tfilah su'er of Mahu. Meaning, does it have a status? Is it obligatory or is it elective? Chayva Rishus. And Rabbi Yeshua answered Rishus, which, by the way, Rebbe was soisim in our Mishnah ke Rabbi Yeshua. Bava sholas Rabbi Gamliel. And by the way, in a Beis HaMedrash, that's the way it works. When you ask a shayla halacha l'maisa, you can't do that. You can't ask her. And by the way, here even the first Rav gave him a leniency. Whereas if a guy is looking for a heter, normally the first person says, Chayva, the other, yeah, I need another heter. It wasn't that. He wanted to know. He was learning. He was a Talmud. Tzilah said of Mao. So Rabbi Gamliel answered, Chayva. And this Talmud, Amar Loi, Rabbi Yeshua, Amar Li Rishus. And at least, let's go. Rabbi Gamliel understood that the Rashbi was challenging his halachic authority. He was the bottom line. He was the Rav of Anash al-Asa. You can't argue with that. Halacha l'mais. So Amaloi, Rabbi Gamliel told this Talmud, L'machar kisheikonis lebeis havad. Tomorrow, when I'm going to come to the Beis Havad, I think that not Beis HaMedrash, Beis Havad is because for him, Beis Havad is where you would come together, you would make an assembly, you would pass kandinim. What do we have? We have something, everything is different. Amoid, Usha'oil es halachazoi. Stand up and ask. I want you to know something else, that when you stand and ask, I think that's also something that you do in a Sanhedrin. In a Beis HaMedrash, when people are learning Torah, you don't have to stand to ask. In other words, Rabbi Gamliel understood this to be a halacha l'maisa question. What do you have in the Bavli? That when the warriors will enter. All these lashonis you don't have over here. I think the word warriors is the learning of yeshiva. In yeshiva, there are warriors. You know, the way we learned in yeshiva, Shakal Vataria, you have one logic, you have another logic. Halacha l'maisa is much calmer. L'machar Amad Oisat Talmud, V'shols Rabbi Gamliel, Tfilah son of Mao. To which Rabbi Gamliel responded, Amaloi Chayva. Amaloi. So this Talmud says, Rabbi Yeshua Amar Li Rishus. That's all they needed to hear. So Amar Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi Yeshua Hu Omer Rishus. Do you say that? Guys, you remember in Rosh Hashanah that Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, there were 2 other times prior to this that they had a big machlokes. One time just a minute, there's another story in Bechayris, but there's not enough time to share everything. There, the story is that they both made calendars. Again, the Sanhedrin was functioning, and they came to a machlokes when Rosh Hashanah is. They came to a machlokes different when Yom Kippur is. And when Rabbi Gamliel found out about it, he told Rabbi Yeshua that you, on your Yom Kippur, you have to come to me on a donkey holding a money belt. B'machal Yom Kippur, midarabanan, b'machal b'faresia. And when Rabbi Yeshua did it, Rabbi Gamliel kissed him and he thanked him for that. But there's another story in Bechayris. There was an halacha lamaisa. There was already disputes between them, and Rabbi Gamliel understood that here you have again he's disputing with me halacha lamaisa, which will make the authority of the Sanhedrin weaken. Amaloi, Rabbi Gamliel told to Rabbi Yeshua, "Moed al raglecha v'yiducha." Stand up on your feet, and I want everyone to see how that Talmud is gonna reconfirm that you're the person who said reshus. And he stood up. Now, what was supposed to happen? What was supposed to happen is that he should have gotten up and he should have testified against him, and there should have been a resolution there. Rabbi Gamliel was so upset at Rabbi Yeshua, he says, let's stand up. I want him to testify. I want you to say yay or nay. And he stood up, and Rabbi Gamliel began to darshan about other things. He wanted Rabbi Yeshua Stam to stand up. And that was a shameful thing for it to happen. But Rabbi Yeshua, I'm in the ragla, waiting for this to be resolved, waiting for the testimony to happen against him. And the people started to get very upset with Rabbi Gamliel. They began to be merane. Merane means they began to murmur, they began to whisper with each other. It's not right to keep them so ashamed. And what they did is that no one had the courage, I think, to right away challenge Rabbi Gamliel. But what they did is, today it would be, they took away his microphone. How do you take away someone's microphone? So now we already had so many times today, the Amoida, here, the Maturgaman. They spoke quietly, the big Chachamim. But people have to hear. So and they also spoke on Lashon HaKodesh. Most people needed to understand. Not everyone spoke Yiddish. Some people needed to hear it in English. So you had a Maturgaman that would translate from their holy tongue until the Yiddish then, to the Aramish, to the Jewish Aramish. And that was Rab Chatzpitz. After that, they told him, not only should you stop interpreting, but tell the people that they should go home. And the Amru, and they also told Rab Zinoin HaChazon, says the Manafulda, he was the Shamish, that basically Rab Chatzpitz was told, stop interpreting. That's really what happened. And they told Rab Zinoin, make an announcement, the class is over. And his Chilva Amar, and Rab Zinoin made that announcement. He sided with this rebellion. So his Chilva Amdu Kol Ha'am, Al Ragleim, people started to get up, and when they got up, the people, they quoted, says the Rashirilio Apasik Nachum. For Amr Olain, they told Rabbi Gamliel, Ki almi loy avra ra'as chatamid, upon whom has your evil not constantly passed? That's a very sharp expression. And upon whom is, like we mentioned, that you already had two prior stories of Rabbi Yeshua, and as we'll see soon, Rabbi Gamliel was very strong with many other chachamim. That means if not in the context of learning, in the context of paskening dinim, in the context of the Sanhedrin, if someone challenged Rabbi Gamliel, he gave it to them. And so now this never happened. Never happened before, never happened later. So the Nasi, the Maturgaman stopped interpreting, and the overseer told the people, everyone, there's no class today. He's talking, just imagine this. And everyone left. They embarrassed Rabbi Gamliel big time, but this is more than an embarrassment. That took away his authority. And at Kedei Kach, Mem Zayin with Beis, now they need to appoint a new Nasi. No one is coming back to hear his class. It's like they demoted the prime minister. We were a group of Chabad Solo, just came back from Eretz Yisrael. One of the big statements that we heard from the biggest army base in the north, 3,500 soldiers in Bashan. Oig Malach HaBashan was the king. We went to Ever Layarden Shabbos. And they said that even if an order will be given for us to stop, we will not listen to the government. Many soldiers said that. There is a spirit of rebellion, so they needed someone new to lead them if they're not going to hear what they want. This is something, we're living in a very shaky time. So what happened was, ultimately, they appointed Holcho Minus Rabbi Elazar ben Azar b'Yeshiva. They appointed Rabbi Elazar ben Azar. There's so many more details, Chavra, that we have in the Bavli. If you remember, you can't imagine. How old was he? Remember, in the Bavli, we learned he was 18. In the Bavli, we learned that when he says, we had this on Daf Tezayin, I think, on the base. We learned in the Bavli that he made that statement. The Gemara says it in the story when he was appointed, because 18, maybe Shmuel Hanavi, he became like 70. The Yerushalmi holds he never made that statement in the sage. We learned that in the Gemara. The Gemara says that from here you see that even though he was appointed to be a leader, he still lived a long life. He did not make it on this day. The Gemara doesn't bring it over here. So machlokes. Why would he say that I was not zoicha for the Chachamim to hold like me? He was only 18 years old. Why should the Chachamim follow an 18-year-old? He said it when he was almost 70. And before the Ben Zoyma, we learned that when we spoke before. Coming back over here, they appointed him. Now here it says in our Gemara that he was 16. Really, in the Shinun Eschais, you have two other versions. Either he was 17 or he was 13 years old. You have to understand what that means. And what happened was, in the Bavli, he went, he says, I have to consult my wife. His wife told him that, why would you take this position? Tomorrow they're going to demote you. When people are in a mode of a rebellion, what do you think the new leader is gonna have a better thing, a better end? And he responded, if someone is giving you up to drink wine in a fancy cup, and that they'll take it away from you tomorrow, you shouldn't drink from it today. They want to appoint me Nasi today, let me be a Nasi today. None of this is written over here. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. There are many details not written here. What happened was, that all of his head became filled with gray hair. And I would say something interesting, that when people think about the beard, if he was 13 years old, he didn't have a beard. He was a child. He was 13. So his hair became Savus.
He was married at 13?
But it doesn't say he was married here. Different story. The Bavli says he consulted his wife. You don't have it over here. Could be that was the machlekes. Maybe by 13. Now, it doesn't mean that he wasn't married by 13. Yes. You had great chachamim who got married at that age. But let's go back to it. In the Gemara here, it's written 16. Just the Shinun Eschais brings 16, 17, 13, and the Bavli 18. The Gemara doesn't say here in the Yerushalmi that they were looking at other candidates and why they did not choose them. But we know from the Bavli that they wanted to appoint Rabbi Yeshua. They wanted to appoint Rabbi Akiva. Both. So here we're just saying that after they appointed him, he was at pain. Why was he at pain? That this is not ego. He was in pain. The fact is he wasn't chosen. V'amar. Now, I'm not talking about how the art scroll learns pshat. L'chayra, this was his pain. Amad Geja. I mean, that's basically what he said. That loishu ben Torah Yosem Meni. He knew why they chose Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. It wasn't the testament to some sort of lack in learning. We have other stories the Gemara brings that when Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was shown by the Oibishter, the Rabbi Akiva teaching Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Oibishter, why didn't you give the Torah through him? Rabbi Akiva was the greatest. Elo, Shu ben Gedolim Yosem Menu, that he has a greater yichus than I have. And Rabbi Akiva was Ben Gadim. According to some opinions, Rabbi Akiva's father was a Gadim. Or other opinions, his grandfather. So that's the reason why it wasn't appointed. And you can argue, it was even better for him, yeah, but he needed it. There was going to be a big kapeda from Rama Gamliel. He was a kappa, and like that kapeda could have hurt them. And for that, you need to have schus. Even though you can counter argue, what greater schus is a ger? A ger is the son of God. Anyways, that's what happened. That's why they didn't appoint Rabbi. And therefore he says, Ashrei Adam shezichu lo yavosav. How lucky, how fortunate is a person who his family, his yichus already gave him merits. And Ashrei Adam sheyesh lo yosei b'mishali talis. Fortunate is a man who has a peg, who has a stake to lean on, which was the case of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, which was, the Gemara asks, they began to look at the yichus. Maybe they didn't find such great yichus. As Mish Azari, they need to go back 10 generations. And 10 generations, he was the 10th from Ezra. Now the Gemara says, one of the things that happened, again, details just quoting from the Bavli, that Rabbi Gamliel, he insisted that whoever's outside doesn't match the inside. Outside, all people are from. Inside, oigevalt. If the inside is not like the outside, if the toicha is not kebaroi, they were not allowed to enter the Beis Medrash. Many say that it wasn't that they had guards. It says a shayman. He says what they did was they locked the doors. They made it difficult to come and learn. When it's learning is difficult, only Misha Toicha Kebari will make the effort. Like the story with Hillel Zajac. It wasn't a mamash a guard. Learning is Yabalabas, you have to wake up early. Is it easy to wake up early? No. No, so the Eibushin makes life in a way where to make these choices, you have to make the extra effort. And not everyone made the extra effort. So on the day that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was promoted, he changed the policies. He made it easy to learn. And when he made it easy to learn, many, many more people came to learn. The Kamas of Solon Hoyasham, how many new benches were added? And the numbers are different than on the Bavli. Rabbi Yaakov ben Sisi Amar, Shmoinim Safsolom Hoyasham, Shaltam Chachamim. There were 80 new benches filled with Tamei Chachamim. Chutz min ha'oimim la'choid ha'goder, aside of the people that stood behind the fence that there wasn't even room for them to enter. Rabbi Yosef ben Avon Amar, Shloish Meyes Hoyasham. There were 300 new benches. Chutz min ha'oimim la'choid ha'goder. In the Bible, we have 400, we have 700. It's all different numbers. Now, Gemara now says, Kai Titanin Taman, that the fact that we know this moment where so many new Talmidei Chachamim came in. We know it from other places. First, we're quoting a Mishnah in Zajac, and the Mishnah is saying that the Yoim Sheyshivas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Yeshiva, etc., you push it. You see from over there that the Charedim quotes the whole text of Amar Rav Shimon ben Asi. I'm reading the top Charedim. Mekubal ani mipi shivim u'shnayim zakenim, that the Yoim Sheishivu es ben Azariah so and so happened. So you see that that was a big moment in Jewish history, like the day he became the Nasi. Also, we have another Mishnah in Ksubas, Tanon Taninon, that Zem Midrash Darash Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah lefnei Chachama bekerem b'Yavne. And here we're focusing on the words kerem b'Yavne v'chi kerem hoyasham. Was there a vineyard in the Beis HaMedrash? You can say maybe they wanted to make a l'chaim. Every day there's another yard site. Here in the shul, every day there's another l'chaim. So they had a kerem, but that's not the pshat. Elo Tamei Chachamim shehoyo asuyim shure is kekerem. That they were sitting like in a kerem, like we explained, not like in a semicircle. That is the unique koyach that they had in the Yavna that gives context to this whole story. That Yavna looked like a vineyard, but really it was also the Sanhedrin. Okay, now they promoted Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. They demoted Rabbi Gamliel. What did Rabbi Gamliel do? He made a cheshbon hanefesh, and he realized that he was acting too strongly. And he has to go appease, and we see clearly that it wasn't only Rabbi Yeshua that he offended; there were many others. So miyad holoch le Rabbi Gamliel itzel kol echad v'yechad. He went to many other lefaisa bebeisai. You see the greatness of Rabbi Gamliel. If it would have been an ego thing, he would have gotten more angry. It wasn't for his ego. When he realized, anyways, he wasn't the Nasi. If I'm not the Nasi, he had no need for personal honor. He went to every single one's home. That's a big thing. Many times you're mafias a person. Two people want to make peace, so they say, when I'll meet you in the Beis HaMedrash, I'll apologize. When I'll meet you in the mikvah, I'll apologize. To go to someone's home, that's already a gavaldik act. And ultimately, the last one who he went to was to Rabbi Yeshua. Azal Gabi Rabbi Yeshua. And Ashkeche, and he found that Rabbi Yeshua was Yosef Ovid Machtan, that he was manufacturing needles. The Bavli says he was a metalsmith. And then a metalsmith earned a very meagerly parnas. So the first time he saw the occupation of Rabbi Yeshua. So Amalei, so Gamliel tells him, Omin Ilan Atchaya, can you have a living from this? Now don't think that Rabbi Gamliel didn't know before what his Talmidim did to make a living, but Rabbi Yeshua really didn't want people to know that he's so poor. He managed to hide it. And now Rabbi Gamliel going to his home, he saw what he did. So Amalei, Rabbi Yeshua told him, Ad Kidoin Ad Boya Meida. Until now, you didn't know that I don't have a livelihood? Had you been a real leader, you would have made the effort to know. Just like you made people make an effort to come into the Beis HaMedrash. Even though I hid from you my livelihood, you should have made the extra effort to know how little of a parnas I had. And he says, Oy loy lador, woe is it to a generation that you are its leader. And here you see that a big part of a leader is to know how the oilam is making a living. And Rabbi Gamliel accepted all of that. He accepted the Musa. Gamliel told him, I have spoken excessively against you. Is the ultimate expression of I'm apologizing. And It's amazing that the Gemara doesn't even have to write that Rabbi Yeshua accepted the apology. It's like a given, which is also amazing. The moment he apologized, it's self-understood. Rabbi Yeshua was Michael. If Rabbi Yeshua was Michael, why was he demoted? Because he insulted all of the Chachamim. They all forgave him. So now really you have to put him back. Problem is, what are you going to do with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? So Vashalchon Gabriel Elazar ben Azariah Chat Katzor, they sent a laundryman to inform Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Maybe laundry is the concept of tshuva. You're cleaning the garments, that the garments were cleansed. Other people say it wasn't a Katzor, it was Rabbi Akiva. And Amaloi, and how did they inform Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that it's time to reappoint Rabbi Gamliel? No, it's the flaw that we found in him was fixed. He did tshuva. That me, Shahu, Maza, Ben Maza, Yaz. The one, Maza is the one who sprinkles the ashes of the red heifer, but they use that as a mashal. Whoever himself is a sprinkler and he's the son of a sprinkler, he should continue to be the sprinkler. However, Misha Eno Eloi Maza, Veloy Ben Maza, one who neither himself is a sprinkler, nor he's the son of a sprinkler, is Yemar Lamaza Ben Maza. Should he tell the person who is qualified that your waters is stam ordinary cave waters, that the efracha, that your ashes are stam normal burnt ashes? In other words, they told Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that really Rabbi Gamliel is more qualified. We only demoted him because he was acting too strongly against the Chachamim, and the last drop of the bucket was against Rabbi Yeshua. But now that we removed that, he's more qualified. Amaloi. I see that you made up with Rabbi Gamliel. I'm also going to demote myself. If you made up with him, like beautiful, he wasn't saying no. Now I have to stand for my honor. I'm going to go with you to notify Rabbi Gamliel that he's reinstated. Gavaldik. Now they saw the greatness of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, accepting a position of leadership is one thing, but once you accepted it, to be demoted is very difficult. I'm demoting myself. Now we didn't want to demote him. So Afal Pikain, so we did not really demote Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Ella, now here's a big question mark. Here the Gemara says, Mino Oisei Avbeis, and they made Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah into the Avbeis. And I want you to know that in the Bavli we learned that Rabbi Shua was the Avbeis. The Nasi is like number one, the Avbeis is number two. And when they sat in the Sanhedrin, they didn't even sit. These two sat separately. So either there's a machloikas, which is difficult to say in such a detail, who was the Avbeis. And the Bavli, there's something else. In the Bavli, there's a whole different girsa, maybe a different girsa, that one of the jobs of the Nasi, this is something Americans understand, we have more time, we have to learn by it, is that the Nasi gave the sermon on Shabbos. In America, the whole rabbi is the lecturer on Shabbos. So what they did is that 3 weeks out of the month, Rabbi Gamliel gave the lecture, and not to fully demote Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, 1 week out of the month, Shabbos Mavarchin, he gave the lecture, he gave the drush. And many times in the Bavli, you have when someone was sick and they couldn't make it to Shalom Shabbos, he would ask his chaverim, who Shabbos was it? In other words, not what was the drasha, I don't even care. I just want to know who gave the drasha. That's much bigger news as to what was the drasha. None of that is written over here. And all of that is, someone can write a sefer on all of these discrepancies and making some sort of underlying common something, which is why the story here is like this and the story like there is like that. Let's move on, Vaited. We have more time. Thank God we could have started a few minutes early, but let's do what we have. This says the second Mishnah, Halacha Beis, in the 4th chapter, here on Daf Mem Zayin Omid Beis. It's amazing that we quoted Rabbi Nechuna ben Hakana. How many times did you hear anything from him? Here we're quoting something in our Mishnah. We had it in the Gemara, now we have it in the Mishnah. Rabbi Nechuna ben Hakana, he would articulate a unique prayer. The elaboration of his prayer, the Gemara is going to quote in the Braisa. The Mishnah Rabbi didn't find it important to write. But Tefillah Ketzara. And Amrullah, they asked him, that means in the Mishnah, they didn't even know exactly every word that he's saying. They wanted to know what's the content of his prayer. Ma tiva shel tefillah zu. So he told them not the verbatim his tefillah. He told them the tiva, the toichan of the tefillah. Amar lahem. He told the chevrem that bikni sasi when I enter the Beis Hamedrash. What do we have in? I think you have, if you take a look, whoever is having an art scroll, look inside, open up the first page. Many other Gemaras printed. That's one of the versions of his elaborated prayer. But here he's telling them the Teichen, Ani mispalel sheloi teda takol al yod. I daven to the Eibishter that no mishap should happen through me, says the Pnei Moshe, sheloi yekosher b'dval halach. I don't want to give a wrong halachic ruling, which also shows you his position, because if you're just one of the Chevra, then the discussion on the Beis HaMedrash is not halacha l'maisa. You're just sharing your opinion. There's no michshoil in there. You can be wrong. Who cares? Everyone is giving their svara. Once it's not a discussion, a Talmudic discussion, once it's a halachic discussion, then you have to be careful. So he davened every day. He shouldn't make a mistake. And the Itziyasi, ani noisen, choydaya al chelki. I give thanks to Hashem for my portion. And these are words that many of us say when we make a siyum and a masechta. Now that's the Gemara. So the Mishnah is very big kitzur. That's the toichet. However, zok the Gemara, and this is really quoting a brayso. What exactly was his tefillah? And by the way, the nusach that you have in the art scroll and in any other svarim, the nusach and the Bavli, the nusach in the Yerushalmi are not the same. First is not like we quoted from the Pnei Moshe, which is the toichet, that I shouldn't make a mistake. I should not take offense against the words of my chavedim. Says the chavedim that when people debated, whoever learned by Harav Shachat Shlita, they'll relate to this. Sometimes, for ruchnistic reasons, the words can become very offensive. You lack of chachma. Let's not get there. So many times people can get offended. Now, what happens is that we don't want for the learning to be a negative emotional experience where you're feeling that you're being beaten up. Okay, so you made a mistake. It doesn't make you into the idiot that someone might be telling you are. So we don't want to go there. So I shouldn't be makbid against my chaveris. And these guys, when they had an akbada, they hurt them. And well, you think I'm also suspect sometimes to expressing myself in a way where I can offend someone, and my chaver will take offense. That's the first thing they daven. The second thing is what we learned in the Pnei Moshe. I shouldn't make a halachic mistake. And shaloi nitame esator v'lo netayda satame, shaloi neser esamuter v'lo nater esasur. Right? You don't have any of these words over here. The nusach we have in the Bavli is different. Another in the Kodah. Why didn't they mention anything with Dinei Mamanis? So you should know that the Dinei Mamanis, that type of learning is something kosher or not. For Dinei Mamanis, it was just a real Beis Din, and that's something else. He didn't sit in such a Beis Din. He wasn't concerned about that. And then Mtseisi, Misbaish, if that were to happen, either I offend or take offense, or if I make a halachic mistake, I'll be ashamed. Lo hazeh ulo olam haba. And we'll be many of us say this when we make a siyum. I'm not a member in a theater and in drinking houses and bars. Don't you think it's easy to go to a theater? They also have amalah. They drink. You think it's easy to drink? They're also diligent. I am and they are. Ani amel, but leaders Gan Eden. Shenemar, different nusach than we make in the Siyum. Tehillim Tazayin, Ki loy sazoiv nafshi l'shoel. You will not abandon my soul to the shoel. Loisiten chasidcha l'reshachas. You will not allow your chassid to witness destruction because I chose to make my portion into the portion of a Beis HaMedrash and Beis HaKnesses. Now that we have in the 1 more minute left, so the Gemara wants you to know that it's not only that, it's now we're going to learn about other tefillos that other Beit Hanai made. Rapidos, B'Shem Rabbi Yaakov Baridi. Rabbi Lazar, Mispalel, B'chol Yom Shalosh Tefillos, La'achat Tefillos. After he davened, after every tefillah, he davened another tefillah. And Ma'hu Omer, what was that tefillah? He wrote Mufanach Hashem like I say, Sholei Talas, Seno Leva Adam. Let hatred of us not enter the heart of any man. That was they davened that they should not be hated. And in reverse also. Sinas Adam Tala Ali Beinu. Just to know, Sinas Adam is not Sinas Yid. Sinas Adam. Jealousy of any other man should not enter our hearts. Now it's interesting, they didn't daven for others not to be jealous of them. That didn't bother them. Hatred, yeah, jealousy. And may your Torah be our occupation. It doesn't mean that they were davening not to have to work for a living. They all work for a living. But there's working with your hands and working with your soul. That our work should be Torah. The yield divorenu tachlunim lefanecha. When we daven, our davening should have meaning. It shouldn't be by route. Rabbi Chaya bar Abba Moisif usiyachad levavenu liyira shemecha. We should have real yiras Hashem. Usirachakenu mikol ma shesoneso. And distance us. Don't tempt me. I should already be distant from everything you hate. Usekarvenu, make it easy for us. L'chol ma she'ahavta. And v'tase imanu tzedakah. We're asking of God to do tzedakah. Doesn't mean tzedek here. Tzedakah means that God should act with us beyond the letter of the law, not because we are worthy of it, but laman shemecha. To be continued.